of snacks and books.
Yeah, I mean, I would like, if you could add like 500. And just keep, yeah, like 500, because I put all the money on the phone, like $100. I put it onto the phone, expensive calls. I don't know. Yeah, you could.
Wow, so you could possibly set up for, that's a lot of money if you're spending on Friday.
It's like, $3, 15, like $3 or $4 for 15 minutes.
So you can call it what it is.
No, I just because the last, yeah, it's not really, I mean, I think I have $100 left from the 200 thing, so. But now I'm asking for 500 to be put on, because, you know,
So you can call Brian. Yeah. So you can call Brian.
I did call him, we talked, and is Dad able to meet with him in like Waynesville or Silva
Nope.
tomorrow
For what?
for the money?
Chloe, that, no. I'm not gonna do it. That is yours and you're gonna get it for the rest, for however long you're in jail.
What?
That money is for you to eat and to survive on.
And he's going, he's gonna give me the money too, like he said he will, like.
She's trying to get her parents to give him $500. What the fuck? She is a selfish little brat.
No, you won't. No, you won't. You're gonna be dropped out of his life the next year, I promise you. Well, the money is not even, it's not even available right now. His dad has, he's invested.
Invested in what? I never said that to happen. I said that he could do whatever he said that was like when he was gonna like make, you can invest a couple hundred or something.
He doesn't have the money, he doesn't have it to get right away.
Can you explain that?
I just did, he invested it.
And why?
I don't know, you have to talk to Dad about it, you have to check on his phone number.
Well, I tried to call him, he didn't answer.
Oh, he was with him?
You're telling me there's no way to get, I think you're lying. Are you sure about that? Like, there's really no way.
No, your mother's a liar.
I believe you told me about lying. I had a reason why I did.
Huh?
I have no reason why I did. We were trying to get the
Why do you need the money?
We were trying to get the fusion for you and Hannah. And
Sweet.
someone was invested, and when all this happened, he went ahead and invested all of it. I mean, he can get it, but it's not gonna be.
Can you speak with Brian? Can they set up communications with each other? Can you please have Dad talk to him? Because Brian said that Dad promised to call him, and he has done it yet.
Yeah, that is funny, more anybody.
Okay.
Brian maybe decides to throw these little words in. How we promise this, or how we promise that, or I refuse an animal, or whatever. He doesn't tell us the truth,
Well, he said he didn't have the uniform, and you asked for it, and his dad asked for it, but he has the uniform now.
Sorry, but it's not worth $65,000. Or whatever it was. And you're silly if you think, I told you, buddy, you're gonna lose your family if you go to travel. And if you're okay with that, then so be it.
No, I feel like when things settle down, we'll be okay again, when it's all heated right now.
Well, you are not thinking clearly, because giving him that money, you'll never see anything again.
Yeah.
You'll never see any of it again.
Think it's cool, think about him, think it's not. Please don't do that.
Chloe, he's moving on after this is over. I wish you realize that. He's moving on to his next victim.
Yeah.
The next young children he can brainwash.
Children living on.
Were you 16 when you did?
Okay, guys.
Well, you were a teenager, folks.
Huh?
Anyway.
Well, you can't say that again, you can't.
I can't say that, I'm destroying my family's life.
I didn't.
I can't.
I started it.
No, we both did that.
Really, because all he ever did was try to fix our family, like, remember, like, he was making.
Stop.
What do you mean?
Stop.
Okay, that is true.
Your father and I have never needed fixing. So I don't even know what you mean by that.
Emotionally, you were very leaving.
No, I mean, emotionally, you have your problems, and you never shared them with us. So, you know what, fine.
I could,
Wow.
but then he taught me.
You found a 40-year-old man at the age of 16 to share your issues with. Good for you. And look where you're at.
Yep. Well done, Mum.
Can you move the money?
I'll talk to Dad.
Dad,
You need to go through Angela about all this instead of something on and on a recorded phone call.
it's okay. It's okay. Okay, all right.
The thing about your words, like,
It was Mom. It would be okay if you just told Dad to speak with him. Then it wouldn't be anybody.
I'm not telling your father anything. Your dad's laughing for a reason.
Mom, you can't just steal my money. Mom, that's what you're doing.
Is that what you think I'm doing?
No, I think that's what you're doing if you don't listen. Please don't do this. Don't make a war between us. Like, I'm asking you to do something with my money. Please just.
Chloe, the only person that made a war between us is you. I don't touch your money, and nor do I want that money.
Okay, Mom, can you please have that unblocked?
Again, I will talk to him, and I will talk to Angela. Or you can talk to Angela.
Well, all we need to do is tell
And the way you, Chloe, I don't want a penny from you.
And
You took everything away from me that ever mattered from you.
I'm glad that we're
So
on.
don't ever accuse me of stealing any money.
No.
See, you don't understand what we're going through. You really don't.
I know you're not trying to steal my money, but you're trying to rule over me like I'm a 5-year-old, and it's not okay if you give the money to him.
Somebody should have taken over you. Somebody should have treated you as a 5-year-old 5 years ago. You would have never been in this mess today.
Yeah, you should have, and I wouldn't have been in the situation that you never cared to.
Are you kidding me? This is my fault?
I know you were.
Ms. Jarrett, you indicated that was on February 21st of 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and the next call was on what date?
February the 23rd of 2021.
Publishing States Exhibit 135.
Thank you. Please remain on the line. Hold for acceptance. This is a prepaid call from
Nicole Driver.
an inmate at the Cherokee County Jail, Georgia, carried by Consolidated Telecom. Three-way or call waiting is not allowed and may automatically disconnect this call. This call is subject to monitoring and recording. If you are an attorney or designated legal counsel, contact inmatesales.com at 702-931-3938 to have your number set to do not record. Please select from the following options if you consent to this call being recorded. And to accept this call, dial 1 now. To reject this call, your call has been accepted. Hello?
Hey.
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. What's up?
You're gonna?
Yes.
I saw Angie today. I didn't get my sister. She can't saw me, so I'm on my phone. And, yeah, I don't know. Did she tell you that I was gonna call?
She said you were gonna try to call, but, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it doesn't hit me up.
Well, just for future reference, you can take number, you can push 1 to accept the.
I know that now. I know that.
Okay. Yeah. So we first answer. Well, I talked to her, and I guess you'll be happy to know that they blocked, and I can't call them, so. And I'm not gonna be talking to them, they blocked the number.
Only because you're being forced not to talk to him, right?
I mean, basically, yeah. What do you want me to talk?
But you still don't understand, do you?
Well, I'm not gonna pursue it.
I mean, the things he said to me the other day when we talked was just, it was just people.
When I said,
And I can't,
when I was saying.
what?
You stole, when I'm saying like stealing money, like, you said the investment thing, that's what, because I didn't say, like, I didn't know anything about that, but now I understand what you were saying, and I actually appreciate it.
It's just a different account. It's not something that, well, it doesn't matter, because it's not happening. I refuse.
She's what?
I'm either gonna give it to charity or the government before I give it to him.
Okay, I mean, I'm not, like I said, I can't pursue it anymore, you know, I'm not gonna, if I I was free to do that, I was gonna do it, but I mean, like, you're kind of making it to where.
I do not want to talk about that, I do not want to talk about money anymore. I ain't sensitive to this money. It's been nothing but a curse. I wish it was never in my account to manage. If I would have known this was gonna happen, I would have never cut the money. It's nothing but headache. I don't want a penny of it. I never have, never will. And as far as the other thing that you said was pretty hateful, I mean, and you know, it's not my fault that it's not my fault that you're going through this. And I was not attacking another to any of you.
I don't know where you're getting all this from, but you like to stop talking.
Because you told me I should have been more strict. When I said I should have been more strict, you said yes. Then maybe this wasn't happening. But Chloe, I don't think you remember how you were as a teenager. You never listened to, yeah, you never listened to me. Just like now, you still don't listen to me. I can tell you what's best for you, and you'll just argue with me because it's not what you want. And the fact of the matter is I've got 30 years on you. Okay, you're 20 years old, and you're inexperienced, and you just are going with the first thing that you go, the first person that you met with, or met. That happened to be twice your age, or more. Which means you've got plenty of life experience, way more than you will, or that you do, that you have. So, I also have way more life experience than you, and I really wish just once in a while you would actually take my advice. But if you choose you don't want to take my advice, that's fine, then there's really no reason for you to call.
Okay, then you move all the money back into my, like, then, okay, so, if I'm talking to you, that's, you know, how am I supposed to get, what I need to promise you? How am I supposed to get it? I will talk to you.
Dad and I are gonna start putting money on your account. It's gonna be a lot less than what you're used to.
Oh, you're gonna
You've got money on there right now. You've got probably, I think, about $200. That will last you quite a while.
I have, and I moved half of it to my phone, so I only have 127 on it, and I moved, there's 50 of it, actually about 40 now on the phone, and I can't move it back, so.
Okay, well, you probably just put it at $100 yesterday.
Okay,
So whatever's on your phone, so you can check it, you just need to spend it wisely. Okay?
you can start doing it, like you're just gonna start doing it weekly.
No, we're gonna watch and see when you're going down, or you can give me a call, or you can give your father a call.
But it's something you don't want me to do.
Well, probably, you need to manage this money. You can call us once a week if you need anything. You can call once a week if you need anything. If you want to talk and be civil, you can call twice a week. I don't care. The point is you haven't been, since you've been starting to talk to him, you've changed right back to the old Chloe that was before I needed to hear him. Stubborn, he knows everything, nobody else knows anything, type of person. And I don't want to deal with that Chloe. I want to deal with the Chloe that
Well, I would like to.
you were before you started talking to him again.
Well, to me, that started talking for that me before, it was doing a lot of drugs. So, I mean, he
What kind of drugs?
I was like, what do you mean? Like, every,
I'm talking about a month ago when you weren't talking to him, you were civil. What are you talking about drugs? What do you mean?
I thought you meant him way back.
No, Chloe, no. Oh my God. You're such a confused little girl.
Okay, I just want to wrap up.
Are you still taking your money?
Yes,
Forgive me. Well, maybe you need something stronger.
that's really fucked up for you to say that to me.
Don't talk to me that way, and no, it's not.
You're being really rude.
Really. Don't talk to me like that. No, I'm not. I'm speaking the truth.
You know, you think you're speaking, like, that's, it's still for you to say, you're not qualified to say that. Are you a doctor? You want me to start with?
What else do you need, Chloe? What else?
You agree, because of the funeral, you agreed to give 5,000, and I think that's fair. Because.
Well, you know what though? I just found out the state of Georgia will reimburse him. And I was reading that before I talked to Dad. Dad doesn't want to touch that money. other than giving you the money that you need? Because if it's our money, yeah, we have to deal with it.
No, I heard what she told me today. She was making it sound like she was scaring me into not touching it.
Sarah, who?
You,
What are you talking about?
tell Angela, you don't touch that money.
No, because, no, she didn't scare me into not touching it.
Huh?
No, she didn't scare me into not touching it.
Okay, well, I mean, she told me that she told you that.
Okay.
And it sounds like you're listening to her by saying that you're trying not to touch the money. You're trying not to have anything to do with it.
Well, I already told you, I don't even want to talk about it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You can wrap up the conversation. But you're, okay, so you know for a fact, Mom, that he's going to be reimbursed for that because if he's not, it's like.
That according to, yes, I heard that from Angela. That there's a victim advocate or something to do with funeral, I mean, it's been a while since she told me, so I can't really remember what she said word for word, but.
Okay, then I'll talk with her. If I get confirmation that's the case, that's going to be the last that we talk about the money because I don't want to talk about.
Okay, that's all I want to hear about, that's what I want to hear.
But
You're not gonna go down,
okay.
you might not go down, okay?
All right, if that confirmation does come, though, I want to have the five. That's only if she's, she doesn't know for sure she's gonna get that. But,
Well, I'm sure there's a process you have to go through, it just doesn't get nailed. I mean, you're gonna probably have to show how much it costs or whatever, and I'm sure there's I'm sure there's a limit or whatever, but I don't know, I have no idea, I've never been through all that, I don't know.
well, that's the only thing I'm gonna be talking about, it's like, it's
It's so bad, I just don't want to talk about it, because I don't care about it.
okay, well, it's just one little thing, like, it's just that one thing. It's that,
Okay, I really feel like you're being very disrespectful with your tone and your words, and you swearing, I really do. You put this into a lodge, and somehow you're being bitchy to me.
Uh-huh.
because of what happened yesterday, like, I think it's like,
What happened yesterday? I didn't talk to you yesterday, you called me 3 times, I didn't answer.
okay, sorry, the day before, I'm a little funky here.
Mm-hmm. When you were very rude.
When you were telling me what you were going to do with my money, I felt like I was rude and hateful.
Enough, Lori.
It's like
You're gonna be taken care of, whether it comes out of your money, or whether it comes out of that loan, or whether it comes out of my money, okay? You'll be taken care of. But stop making it sound like it's your money to where you're controlling me. This is not happening that way.
I just want to know where my money's at and what's happening with my money.
Your money is in a different account.
Okay,
That's all I know. Dad put it away, I don't talk to him about it, he doesn't talk to me about it. The only time this ever comes up is when you are on the phone. Like I said, we're gonna lower your budget and we'll take care of it.
That money?
Just gotta be very, very careful, on how you spend, because I'm not gonna be putting $200 and $500 down on your account like you were asking. I'm not doing that.
okay, well, you thought to do that to keep legal because those you thought that was a great idea to do.
I told you, this call will be terminated in 2 minutes. Chloe, I told you they charge 10%. You're the one that said put more. Dad doesn't want to, and we're not going to.
Fine, I'm just saying. So when I,
Then you give me a call, we'll see how much they are, and we'll go from there.
you can go on like cheap, and there's something called.
I know. We will, but you really need to be, managing your commissary money,
Well,
you know.
something you're doing that for me.
Fine,
The next point, you're the one who controls it. Something you're gonna be doing that for me.
talk about when you order your food.
Well, I skipped it a couple of times.
This call will be terminated in 1 minute. I get that, Chloe, I get that. I'm just saying, just please start watching and paying attention. And you've done good so far, except the phone calls. I think you're spending way too much time on phone calls. But I think that's about to be over.
Well, one, yeah, it's about the over too, because they called during the weekend, and weekends are more expensive also. That's all.
Okay. Okay. Well, just call them every week, okay?
So, yeah, well, now that I know that, and this is probably gonna hang up, I'll call back and, call back again, because
Okay.
So I'm with my Game of Thrones,
Mhm.
like my own series. She really likes it too. But when we want to be done with that, I'm thinking about,
This call was terminated because it exceeded.
Mm.
I don't have any further questions. I don't have any questions.
You can step down. Thank you. Any other evidence from the state? All right, members of the jury, then that concludes the presentation of evidence in this case. We have some matters that we are going to need to discuss before, outside your presence, before we move on to the next phase of the trial, which will be the attorney's client.
Hang on 1 second. It's got to be done.
Closing arguments. I know you ordered lunch. It probably isn't here yet.
Let's get closing, shall we?
I am going to let to open.
Apparently, they're a little bit spicy. Apparently.
And conclude.
I told you when I stood up before you in opening statements that Hannah would get lost this week. That there would be a lot of shiny objects, there would be a lot of scandalous evidence, there would be a lot about Chloe Driver, the cult they were in, Benyamin, his abusive, controlling practices. And all of a sudden, just like that, we forget why you are all here. This is why. You will have an indictment, and the indictment is not about Chloe Driver being a victim. It is about Hannah being murdered by the one person she should have been able to count on to do anything to protect her. There were issues in this case that are relevant to her mental state, to her state of mind, but they are not the focus of this case. The focus of this case is your decision with regard to the counts of the indictment. And the counts of the indictment are malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, cruelty to children in the first degree. And what I want to do with you, I get to talk to you twice. I get to open and I get to conclude because the state has the burden of proof in this case. So what I would like to do is spend the first portion of me speaking to you about the law that governs your decision. And I stood before you in opening statements and I said, now's not the appropriate time for me to talk to you about the law, but that will come. And I have tried to give you glimpses throughout the course of this trial by asking the right questions for you to understand what issues you need to pay attention to as it relates to the law. And this is the part where hopefully it all comes together and we can talk about applying the law to the facts. So I'm going to spend my first portion with you just talking about the law. And then after the defense delivers their closing argument, then I will talk to you about how we apply the law to the facts in this case. The state has the burden of proving her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And everybody has heard that term, but very few people really understand what it means. But what it is the doubt of a fair-minded, impartial juror honestly seeking the truth. And when the judge reads you the law, you're going to hear embedded in the law at multiple points is that word truth. And what you will see is that a jury trial and your role is about a pursuit of the truth. And the law gives you tools to find it. And what the law says about proof beyond a reasonable doubt is that that is based upon common sense and reason. You are allowed to bring your life experience and your common sense and your reason into that jury deliberation room with you to reach conclusions, to make deductions, to discard stuff that doesn't make sense to you. You are allowed to do that. And the law expressly tells you that you can't. What is evidence? The judge is going to talk to you about the different kinds of evidence. There's two kinds of evidence, and you don't really need to worry too much about the distinction between the two because the weight you give them can be the same. But direct evidence is something that somebody saw, like an eyewitness, something that points directly to a fact. We hear a lot about circumstantial evidence, and it gets kind of a bad rap because it seems like it's less valuable. But really what circumstantial evidence is a set of facts or things that prove something by inference. And I'll give you an example of some circumstantial evidence in this case that we saw. She had cash in her bag. She had a cell phone right there beside her. Those things lead to the inference that she had other options. You can infer, if you wish to do so, that she could have just called 911, that she could have just called an Uber, that she could have just walked out and ran to the neighbor's house next door. You can look at all of the connected surrounding circumstances and you can reach conclusions and make deductions based upon that evidence. You determine the weight to give to the evidence, whether it is direct or circumstantial. That is solely your responsibility as jurors. Now, the judge is also going to tell you that your role is to assess the credibility of the witnesses. And you can consider a lot of things when you're determining the credibility of each witness. And this applies to the statements of the defendant as well, Nicole Driver. You can discard whatever it is you want about the statements she made to the experts, the statements she made in the hospital, and you can accept whatever it is you want. You and you alone are the determiners of the credibility of each statement in this case. And the law gives you tools to decide and assess things that you would normally do in your life just based upon common sense. You know, do these people have a reason to lie? Do they have a motive to lie? Do they have anything to gain from the outcome of this case? Things that you use in your everyday life to assess people's credibility, you can do in this case as well. And the judge is going to instruct you that this is the law, the nature of the facts about which they testify, their means and opportunity of knowing the facts about which they testify. And this is true for expert witnesses as well. And I think that that's an important distinction for you to understand, is that just because somebody comes in here and they're called an expert doesn't mean that you have to automatically accept their testimony or their statement or their conclusions. We saw this week that there were multiple experts and they had varying degrees of thoroughness with regard to what they chose to focus on, with regard to what they assigned weight and significance to. And you can accept or reject any testimony of any expert that came before you this week, just the same as you can with any other witness. The person in this case who has the most to gain is Chloe Driver. And that's clear. We heard evidence from the experts about sort of the cautionary tale that is using the DSM-5 in a forensic setting, because the people in a forensic setting necessarily are facing criminal charges and necessarily have reason to kind of exaggerate their symptoms, because there are defenses under the law that only apply to them if certain things exist. So that's something that you can evaluate in deciding how much credibility and weight to give to the statements that Chloe Driver made after she had had the opportunity to consult with a lawyer and after she understood what her options were for a defense. And I'm going to go through some of her statements in my second closing that she made before she consulted with a lawyer, before she knew the law on insanity. The truest version of her statements about her motivations and why she did what she did was in that hospital when she was writing. It was closest in time to when she committed the act. What you're going to have to determine is what was her mental state at the time she committed the act. So those statements are valuable both in they're the closest in time as you will ever see to her committing the act. And it was prior to her understanding what her options were to get out of the situation she put herself in. So I ask you to assess that in determining which of her versions of statements to assign the most credibility to. Venue. The judge is going to tell you venue is a jurisdictional fact, and every crime has to be prosecuted in the county in which it occurred. And the reason I think this is important to talk to you about in this particular case is because the only crimes committed in Cherokee County were by Chloe Driver. And what I want you to know is that there has been a lot of collateral information put before you about what happened in Asheville, what happened in other places, people that Benyamin has abused elsewhere, crimes committed by third parties. You, me, the judge, nobody in this courtroom has any power or authority to do anything that happened about anything that happened outside of Cherokee County. And so I ask you to focus on what your role is as a juror in this case. And the only crime that happened in Cherokee County was the murder of Hannah Nicole Driver. And I ask you to focus, because that is your role and your duty and the oath that you have taken to determine what the law and evidence is regarding the commission of that crime. Whether somebody else has committed other terrible crimes in another jurisdiction is not a question that you are going to be asked today. And it is not a question that you have taken an oath to resolve. So you have to focus your attention in on Hannah, the law as it relates to Hannah, and the evidence as it relates to Hannah. The charges in this indictment are laid out: malice murder, felony murder based on the underlying crime of aggravated assault, felony murder based upon the underlying crime of cruelty to children in the first degree, and then the offenses of aggravated assault and cruelty to children in the first degree. You'll have the indictment back with you, so you'll be able to look at the charging document, count 1, count 2, count 3, count 4, count 5. But I want to walk through a little bit about what the state has to prove to establish each of those crimes. The first is malice murder. In order to establish and prove malice murder, the state must show that she caused the death of another human being unlawfully and with malice aforethought. And obviously, I told you in the beginning, there's a lot of words in the English language that people know and use, and then the law assigns them maybe a different meaning. So, we say crazy, we say insane, we say mentally ill, and there are definitions to those things and what they mean under the law. There's also a definition about what malice means. So malice does not mean ill will or hatred. And I think that's important because the defense has spent the week talking about how Chloe loved her child. Nobody has to establish that she didn't love her child. The element of the criminal offense is what her intention was in committing the act. And the intention in committing the act of stabbing that child to death doesn't have to be based on ill will or hatred. It can just be the unlawful intent to kill another person without justification. And what malice can also be is when the circumstances show that the defendant did act with a deliberate intention to end someone's life. And we know she did, that she had malice and that she had every intention for Hannah to die. The next count in the indictment is felony murder. Felony murder is when a person causes the death of another by committing a felony. The distinction here is there doesn't have to be any intention to cause the death. There just has to be intention to commit the act. So if you intend to commit the act and it does cause the death, that is a felony murder as long as the underlying act is a felony. And so what we've charged in the indictment is there's one count of malice murder for maliciously and intentionally killing her. Then you have 2 counts of felony murder, and the felonies alleged in those 2 counts are aggravated assault and cruelty to children in the first degree. So if she commits a felony and that causes the death, that's felony murder. And I'll kind of walk you through the underlying felonies in this case as well. So one of the underlying felonies in the indictment that the felony murder count is predicated upon is cruelty to children in the first degree. Cruelty to children in the first degree is when an individual maliciously causes cruel and excessive physical or mental pain to a child under the age of 18 years. So obviously in this case, we know Hannah suffered cruel and excessive pain. We know that. We saw it. We know she was under the age of 18. And we know that the act that she committed was stabbing her in the neck. So all of these elements have been met. With regard to malice used in this, the judge will define it for you, what it means to maliciously cause a child cruel and excessive mental or physical pain. But again, it's not ill will or hatred. Malice just means an intent to cause the pain without justification or excuse. It means a willful doing of the act with a knowledge that the particular harm may result. She committed the act and she had a knowledge that her death, that her cruel and excessive pain would likely result. That is what the definition of malice is in the context of cruelty to children in the first degree. Aggravated assault. In this case, it alleges that she committed the offense of aggravated assault with a knife. Aggravated assault is when an assault is committed against another person with an offensive weapon. The judge will tell you that an offensive weapon can be a number of things. In this case, obviously, we've alleged to say knife, but it's any object that is likely to or does cause death or serious injury to another. And we saw the knife, we know that she used it, and we know that it did result in Hannah's death. The legal elements of each of these offenses and the evidence that came before you is very, very clear. And I understand that the bulk of this case as it relates to the law that's going to get challenging for you guys is the defenses, the insanity defense, and some of the things that sort of pertain to that. So I want to talk about that. Under the law, Chloe Driver is presumed sane. Every person is presumed to be of sound mind and discretion. We start from the proposition that she is sane, that she is criminally responsible for her actions, and that she has to suffer the consequences of her crimes just as any other citizen. That is the position you start from. You may infer that the acts of a person of sound mind and discretion are the product of that person's own will. When the judge will give you this law, she will tell you a person of sound mind and discretion intends the natural and probable consequences of their acts. I will talk to you a little bit more about applying this law to what we know about Chloe Driver and her decisions and the actions that she committed, but it was very, very clear that she understood she was murdering Hannah. And she understood the permanency of that decision. She understands that she was taking away life. And the thing about the law is the law recognizes the value of human life, even if Chloe Driver didn't. When we talk about the insanity defense, the state only has the burden of proving the things I just talked to you about, proving the elements of murder, proving the elements of felony murder, proving the elements of cruelty to children in the first degree, aggravated assault. We have to prove those elements that are contained in the indictment. The defense has the burden of proving her criminal insanity to the extent that she is not criminally responsible. That is not our burden. So that is a difference in the law that is not typical, because usually the state has the burden of proving everything beyond a reasonable doubt. But in this case, because the law presumes she's sane, they have the burden of proving her insanity. You probably noticed in our presentation of evidence, in the state's case, we really just focused on the murder. And in the defense's case, they focus really on the insanity, because that is their burden to raise. It's our burden to focus on the counts and the charges in the indictment before you. You're going to have 4 options on your verdict form. And I think this is important for you to know. It's going to say guilty, not guilty by reason of insanity, or guilty but mentally ill. And I will talk to you a little bit more about what each of these mean as we kind of get into the weeds of it. But this will not be as simple of a verdict form as guilty or not guilty. There are other options. But what I want you to understand is, once all this evidence comes before you, and once I really explain to you what the law is, you will really be left with two options: guilty or guilty but mentally ill. Based upon the evidence that has come before you, you will not be able to find her not guilty of committing the act. She has admitted that she murdered Hannah. Not guilty is really not an option, based upon her own admissions about the act. And I want to talk to you about the law of insanity and what they must prove and all the reasons why it cannot and has not been proven and will not, the evidence will not show that the law of insanity applies to her. And we'll talk about that more in my second close. But what I want you to understand is that you still are going to be making decisions. Even if you choose guilt, you will have to make decisions with regard to guilt or guilty but mentally ill. So when we talk about the insanity defense, I'm eager to get to my second close so we can talk about the evidence and apply this to the evidence, but bear with me here so I can just explain to you the law before we kind of do that equation and put it all together. There are two ways of proving insanity under Georgia law: the inability to distinguish between right from wrong and delusional compulsion. And I want to talk to you about each of those. The inability to distinguish between right and wrong. What the law says is the test is whether the insanity was such that it deprived the person of the mental capacity to distinguish between right and wrong in relation to the act. And the judge will tell you that the question that you have to ask with regard to did she have the capacity to distinguish between right and wrong is her mind so impaired that she is incapable of forming the intent to commit the act, or to understand that a certain consequence would likely result from the act. And when we really get into the weeds and we look at it, it is going to be very, very clear based on her statements to the doctors, her actions, her statements on scene, her statements to the detective, her statements to her mother and Benyamin right after she committed the act. She always knew the wrongfulness of the act. She always knew the consequence of the act. That was never lost on her. She never, ever demonstrated any inability to distinguish between right and wrong. She just chose the wrong. And she understood the result and the consequence of that decision. Delusional compulsion is a little bit trickier, and so I want to walk you through it step by step. You have to have all of these things in order to be found not guilty by reason of insanity based on delusional compulsion. And you will see when I go through this, you'll start to kind of put the pieces together about why we questioned all the experts in the manner that we did. Why are they asking everybody if she was afraid of Hannah? Why are they asking everybody if she ever thought Hannah was a threat to them? Because that's the law. And I want to walk you through it piece by piece. In order to show that she is not guilty by reason of insanity based upon her suffering from a delusional compulsion, what they have to prove is that the defendant was actually laboring under a delusion at the time of the commission of the alleged act. That when she stabbed Hannah to death, she was actively laboring under the compulsion of a delusion. That the criminal act itself, her act of killing Hannah, was connected to that particular delusion. You saw me up here ask the expert, I said, tell me the particular delusion. Because what got lost is that we just talk about in her life, she's had delusions. That's not the question. And we tried very hard to sort of narrow the scope. I want to know when she was in that room, what she was suffering from. I want to know her state of mind at that time, because it is whether she was operating under the compulsion of a delusion at the moment she committed the act, at the time of the crime. There are tons of people in this world who have had delusions or are mentally ill and do not meet the legal definition of insanity. So we need to know, was she suffering from the compulsion of a delusion? What was that particular delusion, and was it connected with the act that she committed? And when we talk about that, it's like if she has a delusion about, there being 169,000 people in the world, what does it have to do with killing Hannah? Those two things are not connected. So there was a lot of religious stuff, a lot of paranoia, a lot of things about, my parents are being watched by the CIA or are the CIA. None of that has anything to do with her motivation and her act of killing Hannah. And that is why in the questioning of all of these experts, I focused very clearly on what were her delusions that related to Hannah? What were her delusions that related to why she killed this baby? That were connected to the victim and connected to the act. Every other delusion, ignore it. It is meaningless under the law. The third prong that has to be present, and this is very important, the delusion has to be to a fact that, if true, would have justified the act committed by the accused. What does that mean? Justification under Georgia law is basically Georgia's self-defense laws. The delusion she was suffering under has to relate to the particular delusion, has to relate to the act she committed, And the delusion has to be as to a fact that if we assumed it was true, it would justify the act or permit her to act in self-defense. I'll give you an example of one that would. If she was in that room with Hannah and she believed that Hannah morphed into a demon right in front of her and was about to kill her, and she picked up the knife and stabbed Hannah in self-defense, that would be a delusion, if true, that would justify the act, because she would have believed she was in immediate danger of receiving death or serious bodily injury from that baby. And under the self-defense laws of the state of Georgia, if we assume that delusion was true, she would be justified in defending herself. That was not the nature of her delusions. None of them. And we asked every single witness, did she ever say anything about being afraid of Hannah? Did she ever say anything about Hannah being a threat to her or anyone else? Did she ever say anything about needing to defend herself against Hannah? Because that third prong of delusional compulsion requires that if we assume the delusion is true, it has to legally justify her acts. She has to be acting in self-defense if we believe whatever is going on in her head. And no matter how crazy the things were that were going on in her head, not a single shred of evidence has come before you that she ever believed Hannah was a threat to her. And we know that regardless of whether she was having delusions in that room or not, she was not acting in defense of herself or others and was not protecting herself or others from that baby. What we know is that what she has told everybody is that she was more motivated by wanting out of the situation or wanting to save Hannah. That is the opposite of justification in self-defense. She didn't view Hannah as a threat at all. And the defense pointed out in this case, wasn't it true that she was holding the baby's hand in the body cam footage? That's a fact that is helpful to the state because it clearly demonstrates she's not threatened by this baby. She's not afraid of Hannah. Whatever is going on in her mind, she doesn't feel like she has to defend herself against Hannah. Maybe she saw this as a mercy killing. Maybe she was just desperate. But there is absolutely no evidence that this was an act of justification, self-defense, based on what delusion was in her mind. Justification under the law is when she reasonably believed that she had to use that force in order to prevent serious bodily injury or death from Hannah. Or whether she believed that she had to prevent the commission of a forcible felony by this baby. There's no evidence of that. None. She does not meet the definition of criminal insanity based upon delusional compulsion. Because if she was suffering under delusions when she was in that room, the only delusions related to needing to save Hannah, not to Hannah being a threat that would justify her actions under the law. Delusional compulsion does not apply in this case. The judge is going to tell you that your verdict should be a true verdict. It's one more place in the law where the word true comes in. And a trial is about the pursuit of the truth. It is according to the laws and the evidence as you find it to be. But the judge is going to expressly tell you that you are not to show favor or sympathy to any party. The judge is going to expressly tell you you cannot base your verdict on sympathy. And I think it is important to highlight that you have to look at the facts and the evidence and the law objectively, because there are things about Ms. Driver that are pretty sympathetic. There are things about the situation that she got herself into that are kind of terrible. But the law does not allow you to make decisions about the outcome of this case because you feel sorry for anyone. The law does not allow you to base your verdict on sympathy. So what I ask of you in that regard is when you go back to the jury room, think, do I feel sorry for her for any particular thing? Take your moment, feel sorry for her, and then set that aside. And instead base your decisions on the objective facts and the law, because you've taken an oath and you have a duty to follow the law, and the law expressly tells you you cannot make your decision based on that. Because every victim of crime deserves that treatment. Hannah deserves that. She deserves the objective and fair application of the law and the objective and fair assessment of the facts. That is the law that governs your decision. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more law, but I try to highlight the things that I think point most directly to the issues before you. After the defense has their opportunity to close, I'm going to come back before you and I'm going to help you apply that law to the evidence that we've heard in this case.